With Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, it seems when it comes to the Twisted Childhood universe, not only are they kind of going decade to decade in terms of touching upon different types of horror movies, but with Martin Portlock's performance, they really want to touch upon not only the effect of Pennywise, specifically Tim Curry's, and Heath Ledger's Joker had on the movie industry, but also want to introduce some LGBT plus themes to the franchise. To summarize the film, in Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, the focus is of course on Peter Pan, who is a man who for decades has hunted children, specifically boys, and it seems he really hones in on boys who appear to be part of the LGBT plus community. This is perhaps why many of them like the idea of Neverland and how Peter is easily able to coax a lot of them. However, the difference between when Peter first started when he's 17 and now is that things are a bit better for young boys in the LGBT plus community or even trans girls. And even though things have changed, Peter Pan is very much stuck in his ways. And as the Darling family learns when Peter kidnaps Michael, in order to take down or even hunt Peter Pan, you're going to have to really think outside the box because he is not one to be messed with and is definitely formidable. So get into the review section. When it comes to the Twisted Childhood universe, which is the Blood and Honey the Blood and Honey series and now Peter Pan, a lot of people are much more harder on it than I am, and that's because I think I get what's trying to be done here. When it comes to Disney and what it did to a lot of these productions, like for example The Little Mermaid, it took away the dark elements of it and made everything the best it could family friendly and sanitized. In my mind, what's being done with the Twisted Childhood universe is the reverse. It wants to lean more toward being like a grim fairy tale and kind of tapping into that darkness, if not doing like the person who made Wicked did with the book version anyway, and have it so that one little odd or weird thing that kind of raised an eyebrow that was said in the Wizard of Oz, kind of expand upon that and tap into the darkness and sort of the more murky parts of what can be seen as a mostly family-friendly story. So when it comes to Peter Pan, the focus on somebody who wants to be eternally youthful, who mainly focuses on kidnapping boys, who has issues that aren't really developed much in terms of why he's so stunted and now is very childlike. While this film doesn't go deep into Peter Pan's issues, you can see it wants you to really look at that more and eventually expand on it as the Twisted Childhood universe does. And I would even say, considering the whole name in itself, Peter Pan, and how Pan seems to be perhaps himself pansexual, it further pushes the idea that it wants to take note of something small, expand upon it, and really maybe eventually kind of connect it to the story, so that everything doesn't seem like it's just about blood, guts, and, try to do shock value, but really have something rooted that allows you to see how they went on this path. With that said, though, this is a very gruesome movie, and I would say when it came to Blood and Honey, it felt very much like 70s, 80s slasher horror. When it comes to what we get with Peter Pan, while mainly when it comes to the way Peter acts and talks, you get Tim Curry's Pennywise, maybe some Heath Ledger Joker. I would even throw in perhaps Scream by the way that he kind of fights and kills people. And in a way, it almost pushes the idea that as much as these movies are about kind of expanding on little tidbits and dark bits of classic childhood tales, it may also be, sometimes subtly, sometimes not, also paying homages to the childhoods of the creators by sort of giving credence to the different types of horror movies they grew up with and probably weren't old enough to see at the time. But with that in mind, it really gets you to appreciate the different ways that it's trying to figure how to keep things scary, how to keep things gruesome, and make it so that even though a lot of people think these are very gimmicky movies, they want to show that there is the potential for evolution, as I would submit happened between Blood and Honey to Blood and Honey 2, And I would say it's happening from Blood and Honey 2 to Peter Pan. The last highlight for us is just the surprising LGBT plus elements of it. I really did not expect this film to kind of go in that direction. I mean, Peter Pan being pansexual was a bit of a shock. Tinkerbell being a trans woman was also a bit surprising, but that's because I didn't watch a lot of previews before I watched this, because previews would kind of ruin their surprise. But what also is interesting to me is that when it comes to Peter's whole motive, it's not that he's hunting LGBT kids, specifically ones who present as boys originally, just for fun or because he's jealous or something like that. As sort of hinted when it came to the summary, the idea seems to be that because of all the torture stuff he went through, all the torture and stuff that Tinkerbell went through, maybe Peter Pan's mind is under the idea that it's still hard and horrible for boys who present as anything besides masculine or anything besides straight. So when it comes to Neverland, going to a place where they can be free to be themselves and all that, maybe in his twisted mind, that's the only way that LGBT people could be happy and free. Now, granted, Neverland is not a beautiful, happy place, and if you watch the movie, you'll find out why. But it is still an interesting way of approaching a character being evil, wicked in some kind of form, and being LGBT, but not making it so them being some type of queer person is part of the demonization of them, if that makes sense. Because I don't think at all, even though this film wants to pay homage to the wicked ways of past horror films, it doesn't want to demonize the queer community. It wants to give you a sense that because of how Tinkerbell is versus how Peter Pan is versus how Michael is, and Michael's friend, who I assume he has some type of feelings for, it's hard to say, but point of the matter is, I feel like it wants to have queer people part of the conversation and not just as heroes. They want them to be just as much capable of being anything and everything, as much as when it comes to people of color, whether they're black, Asian, or whatever. They don't always have to play the good person, the nice person, the best friend. They could also play the villain, who doesn't have to be some kind of gangster. They could just be a terrible ass person, no matter what. And yet, even with that said, it shouldn't be something that reflects on their community. It just so happens that this whole is part of that community. Which leads to the on the fence topic, and it's just Wendy. Wendy is the type to get on your nerves. It very much feels like she's part of that 80s, 90s heroine who is so fucking stupid in terms of everything they do, and yet they still somehow figure out ways to either get lucky or outsmart the villain. And granted, I'm not saying that bad things don't happen to Wendy. That whole highlight of gruesome things happening, Wendy is subject to quite a few of it. One of them kind of had me flinching because it deals with a shard of glass going through her in a way that makes me glad I haven't had dinner yet. But again, Wendy, a lot of the stuff that happens to her would have been so avoidable if she just had common sense. But as established, when you meet her, when she's talking about being a 17 going on 18-year-old moving with her boyfriend to London, her frontal cortex is not fully developed yet. And as she tries to get Michael back and deals with Peter Pan, it shows in so many ways. But overall, when it comes to Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, I feel like it's showing that with each entry into the Twisted Childhood universe, there's less of a need to heavily rely on the name recognition of a newly public domain character. And instead, what it really wants to do is develop better stories, develop more interesting characters, and make it so it doesn't have to overtly rely on shock value. Instead, it wants to be the type of film franchise which really shows you why public domain exists. It's not to piggyback off of someone's great work that came out 70, 90 years ago. It's about showing different sides of it, giving you different tales, continuing stories potentially, and in the case of the Twisted Childhood universe, give you a sense that these characters have so much more they can do and tell, and what you've seen before, really, you haven't seen nothing yet.